Hi, once again welcome to this video presentation in the series Making Sense of Poetry, particularly in unseen poems. Here we go with number 4, and this time we're looking at the rest of imagery. Here's a reminder of the list of options I gave you. So far we've looked at the physical appearance of the poem, including punctuation. Then we moved on to vocabulary, and now we are going to look at the rest of imagery, for which we need the famous barn door again. Here it comes. So far, everything has been within the confines of a particular work. We've had the simile, we've had the metaphor, and now we move up the scale to the next in the list, allegory and parable. Let's have a look at a very famous example of allegory. This is the most famous Christian allegory of all, by John Bunyan, published in the 17th century. It describes the progress of a good man, aptly named Christian, through all kinds of trials and tribulations, from his home, the city of destruction, to the celestial city of heaven. On the right, one of the most famous obstacles he has to overcome, the Slough of Despond, which he struggles across to gain the side furthest from his home. These two images, by the way, are from a copy dated 1903, costing the princely sum of 2 shillings, which was discovered in my grandmother's house, possibly after the great 1947 floods in Ipswich. So, an allegory is a tale which spans a whole work and which stands for something else. Up comes another famous allegory. This is perhaps the best known of all, George Orwell's Animal Farm. An early Penguin copy, which I bought as a lad, note the price, 2 shillings again, and the last page of the novel on the right-hand side. In it, a farmyard full of animals revolts against the farmer and establishes an ideal communist society, which soon becomes as corrupt as the society it overcame. Look at the last paragraph, where the pigs are arguing with the farmer, Mr. Pilkington. The whole refers to the overthrow of Tsarist society in Russia in 1917 and the communist ideal, which was never created but aspired to. 12 voices were shouting in anger, and they were all alike. No question now what had happened to the faces of the pigs. The creatures outside looked from pig to man, and from man to pig, and from pig to man again. So already it was impossible to say which was which. Animal Farm, if you have not yet read it, is well worth reading through. So, 2 examples, famous examples of allegory. Now we change to parable. And here is one of the best-known biblical parables, that of the Good Samaritan. The real point of the tale is that Samaritans were not particularly liked by the Jews, but here was one helping the man lying on the ground, who had been attacked by thieves and who was in a pretty bad state. 2 other men, as you can see in the distance, have walked by famously on the other side. So parable is like allegory, but it has a different configuration in that it is deliberately there to teach a particular lesson, a religious lesson, which is spelled out at the end. To quote the Bible, "Which now of these 3 thinkest thou was neighbour unto him that fell among the thieves? And he said, He that showed mercy on him. And then said Jesus unto him, go, and do thou likewise. So much for allegory and parable. Everything we have looked at so far has been within the confines of a particular work. Simile, metaphor, allegory and parable. But now comes a big change with the next in the list, the symbol. To examine this in more detail, we need to pinch the red rose from one of the simile examples we looked at earlier. And here it comes. It was used to demonstrate a simile. My love is like a red rose, but it's capable of multitasking. It can also be a symbol for more than one thing too. Red is the colour of passion, of love and romance, and also of adultery. Red has military connotations, as in the Wars of the Roses, Lancaster versus York. So, the symbol is something which stands for something else bigger or more significant than the thing it is symbolising. Let's take a handful of examples. Here comes one straight at you. An owl. The owl can symbolise mystery, wisdom, and intelligence. And another, before all is revealed, so to speak, the moon, the feminine side, eternity, mystery, and a darker aspect of nature. So, what do these three symbolic shapes have in common? First, they are easily recognisable and well known. Second, and more important, they come near the top of the pecking order of images because they're larger than the individual work and can dominate that work. Example number 1. This is from one of Shakespeare's sonnets. Nor did I wonder at the lily's white, nor praise the deep vermilion and the rose. They were but sweet, but figures of delight drawn after you. You, pattern of all those. Yet seemed it winter still, and you away, as with your shadow I with these did play. He played with the idea of the rose, the ideal of beauty, while his lover was absent. Now, Thomas Gray's famous elegy in a country churchyard. The darkness is falling upon the village, and in the distance the sun is set. Now fades the glimmering landscape on the sight, and all the air a solemn stillness holds, save that from yonder ivy-mantled tower the moping owl does to the moon complain of such as, wandering near her secret bower, molest her ancient solitary reign. So the owl is not just a bird flapping through the night. It has a special presence, a kind of mystery. It is about the forces of the night and the mysteries and wonder of darkness. I'm talking about complaining to the moon. Here's a moon to complain to. And the poet this time is Oscar Wilde. The sea is flecked with bars of grey. The dull dead wind is out of tune, and like a withered leaf, the moon is blown across the stormy bay. And suddenly, the moon withdraws her sickle from the lightning skies, and to her sombre cavern flies, wrapped in a veil of yellow gauze. So the moon here, a symbolic figure, almost magically, a sickle-shaped moon, withdrawing from the night and going to a cave in which she dwells. And now, for the last time, our good old friend, the chicken house barn door. We've seen everything, nearly. Simile, metaphor, allegory or parable, symbol, and right at the top of the pecking order with an enormous chicken sitting on it, myth. Here I have to tread a little carefully because myth is about fundamental beliefs and principles that human society has and tells about the most significant parts of our lives. So it's at the top of the pecking order. Myth, like symbol, extends beyond the individual work, but it does not grow outwards from an individual work. It's part of the fabric of our society. And myths explain how we arrived on Earth and why and how we are here now. Myth, by the way, is not meaning something fictitious, but something that is believed in. So I am not casting aspersions on the Bible or any other source of myth, but using the word in general terms. Let's take the creation of the earth, though, the earth and the heavens in the Old Testament. This is what's known as a creation myth, explaining how we came to be on earth and how we lost our original innocence. These are the majestic opening lines of Milton's Paradise Lost. Of man's first disobedience, and the fruit of that forbidden tree whose mortal taste brought death into the world, and all our woe, with loss of Eden, till one greater man restore us, and regain the blissful seat. Sing, heavenly muse. The forbidden tree is the tree of knowledge, of course, and the one greater man is Jesus Christ. Now we take a step back to classical times and the myth of Prometheus. This is a poem by Byron. Here he explains that all poor old Prometheus wanted to do, who was half man and half god, was to alleviate the hard lot of mankind, and the gods simply did not or would not understand this. The basic issue is that man is half human, half divine, and as the last line aptly puts it, a troubled stream from a pure source. Thy godlike crime was to be kind, to render with thy precepts less the sum of human wretchedness, and strengthen man with his own mind. But, baffled as thou wert from high, still in thy patient energy, in the endurance and repulse of thy impenetrable spirit, which earth and heaven could not convulse, a mighty lesson we inherit. Thou art a symbol and a sign to mortals of their fate and force. Like these, man is in part divine, a troubled stream from a pure source. The way he sought to alleviate the lot of mankind, by the way, was to bring fire from heaven down to earth, and that's why he got into a spot of bother. Now let's fade that out and have a summary of what we have seen in the last couple of minutes about the different stages from simile, which is small in its effect, lasts usually for a very short time, and stays within the poem. Next up is a rather tasteful orangey colour for metaphor, which also stays within the poem but can reach out through the poem and be repeated later on in different configurations. Then the symbol, which for the first time extends its reach beyond the poem and can stand there without the context of the poem. The red rose doesn't have to be tied to that poem. It belongs in the general consciousness of man. And finally, myth, which starts out beyond the poem and just sort of penetrates into it, and so forth. Simile, metaphor, symbol, myth. By the way, allegory and parable are subsumed under symbol, just to make things a little less complicated. And that is that. Thank you for listening if you have been, and watching if you've been doing that too. And see you next time with episode 5.